Welcome to Beyond Better, a podcast that explores a simple but profound idea. We all deserve to live lives we love, and that includes our work lives too. I'm your host, Stacey Ennis, an author, book coach, speaker, and long-time location-independent entrepreneur living in Portugal with my family of 4. Join me as I talk business, location independence, writing, publishing, and so much more, all focused on building a life that is beyond better. Welcome. I'm so glad to be with you today to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is leadership. But I've never covered leadership in this specific industry, which is the funeral and death care industry. So I'm really excited to welcome this week's guest, Lisa Baue. Let me tell you a little bit about Lisa. Lisa is a third-generation funeral director and former owner who has worked in the death care and funeral service profession since 1979. For 38 years, she was the president and CEO of Baue Funeral Homes, Crematory, and Cemetery, transforming it into one of the leading firms in the Midwest. In 2024, she founded the Funeral Women Lead Foundation, the first nonprofit organization dedicated solely to advancing women in her profession. And she just released her first book, Wake Up Calls, A Journey of Learning to Lead and Succeed in the Funeral and Deathcare Profession, which quickly became an Amazon bestseller. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm thrilled to be here with you and your audience today. I appreciate being on. This is cool. I've watched all your podcasts and been part of your student body, and now here I am on your podcast.
Yeah,
so it's really fun.
I love it. Your industry is one that I had almost no experience in, didn't know a lot about, and you've really inspired me by how much you care for the people in your industry and about your industry. I would love to share with our listeners and viewers a bit about your backstory. Obviously, I shared in the introduction that you have worked in this industry for many decades, but take us back to your early origins and how you ended up today having an organization called Funeral Women Lead, a book, and really committed to advancing the funeral and death care industry.
Wow, that's a big question. Let's go back to early childhood, I suppose. My grandparents had a funeral home across the street from where I went to school. My dad lived above the funeral home, grew up above the funeral home all his life. So we are a funeral service family, and I was third generation. In 1979, I graduated college with a degree in Spanish and a minor in Portuguese. And of course, you're in Portugal, so I'm excited to come over and practice what I learned so many years ago.
Fala português.
Right, sí, un portugués. Don't get me started because I'm so rusty, but I'll work on that. I never saw myself as a funeral director. It was always men. Men were doing the funeral directing thing. A grandfather in the suit, my dad in the suit. It was all the only women that worked there were secretaries. And honestly, my typing was horrible. That was not my gift. So I went through college and graduated and went into the travel industry for a little while and realized I was kind of a desk person sitting there stamping brochures long before computers. And I'm more of a people person. And I think maybe my dad saw that in me. So I was disillusioned with that profession. And Daddy came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about funeral service? You want to give it a try?" And I had no clue that women could even do this. And he said, "Well, they're starting to." So I decided to come into the family business, gave it a try, and loved it. It's a very people-oriented business. You're really caring for people at a difficult time during their lives. And I loved it with a passion. That was 79. But in 1987, my dad died very, very suddenly. I was 30 years old. I had been licensed for 8 years working in the family business. I knew nothing about business management, ownership. I could barely lead myself, much less others. So I was really kind of lost. And my experiences during those early years, not just as a funeral director and growing up in a very German, strong family, learning some great life lessons from my grandfather and my dad and mom and grandmother, led me into this business. But now what do you do? And being lost was so scary because you feel the weight of world. You have staff, you have families, you have a community that relies on you. And now it's up to you to decide if this family business is going to go forward in the future. So I had some great mentors, and those mentors really pretty much held my hand all the way through the process. One even called me up the day of my dad's visitation and said, "Lisa, what are you going to do? You are going to buy this business, right? And I will help you." And so through all these things I went through, and I had some struggles. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I had no business background, no business degree. And so some of my people decisions were not very sound because I had no leadership training. They didn't teach leadership training in school back then, in high school or college. They still really aren't, unless you get a degree in it. So I had to learn to become a leader. And that was a process, and it took time. And the culture of our company was not a great one because I was more focused on our customers than I was on our staff and supporting them. So I learned a ton from the mentors, but I also learned from my team, and I learned from the experiences of failures and successes. And over the years, there were so many things that happened that people kept saying, "Lisa, share your story." And I was like, well, how do you do that, right? So I don't know how to write a book. I know how to write maybe a blog. Over the years, I learned how to write papers. I learned how to give little speeches here and there and talk to the public, but I had no clue how to share my story with the world. And when I retired in 2019, my children did not want to come in the family business, so I ended up having to sell because I was ready to do something new and different. And because of that, I struggled kind of finding that place. Well, it turned out it was a worldwide pandemic had hit right after we sold. So that gives you time for reflection. And I was told after I sold the business by a very close friend of mine, Dr. Alan Wolfelt, the head of the Center for Loss, that I needed to grieve in more in the loss of my business, my career, my role as a CEO, and what was I going to do next. He said, "Lisa, take a year off." And 3 months later, the pandemic hit, and guess what? I was forced to take at least 6 months off. And so you start thinking, what can I do with what I know? How can I share my story? And would it resonate with anyone? And would it help other people in this industry? My profession was struggling during the pandemic. We were called the last responders. And honestly, Stacy, it was probably the most difficult time for all of us in our lives. And the people that served in death care were struggling. They were burning out. They were leaving our profession at high rates after the pandemic. And I felt and most of them were women, and I felt a strong need to do something about it. So what do you do first? What do you do second? I started a little coaching company and decided to start helping some of these young people find their way in the profession. Some of these business owners who were struggling after the pandemic find ways to better improve their business. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks and what not to do. And I also learned a few things that were good best practices that I wanted to share with the world. So all of a sudden I saw this thing online and it was a class to learn how to write a book. And it was your class, Stacy. So I kind of looked over your website and I thought, well, everybody says to share my story. Maybe this is a way to do it. So I signed up and I went through your first 6-week class. At the same time, I went through some more discovery that as a coach and a young coach, just young in years of experience coaching other business people, I could only help so many. And the world was changing rapidly, and young women were coming into our profession at high rates. In fact, they're coming in at about a 75% rate of women to men in our mortuary schools today. But they're not staying. And they're telling me during coaching, they're not feeling like they're being supported. So that led me to not just sharing my story as I took your 6-month class and continued down the road of really developing this book into something that could possibly have lessons in it in leadership and lessons in self-confidence and lessons in how to use your heart, your head, and your grit in everything you do as a business person. But it also, I believe, can help a whole generation of young people succeed and thrive in our business because we're losing them. The schedules are crazy. We work nights, weekends, holidays, all of our career. And this next generation of professionals coming up the pike don't they want more work-life balance. Family is important to them, as it should be to all of us. And we baby boomers didn't always do the right thing in our work ethics. We probably killed most of ourselves a lot, and lots of burnout, right? So what can you teach? What can you do with this? And it was through your class that I actually went into discovery of how to bring some of the lessons I learned along with my story, kind of a hybrid memoir is what it's called,
Mhm.
to the world. At the same time, realizing I'm one little person to share my story, what could an organization like Funeral Women Lead, the non-for-profit I started, do to give back to help women grow as leaders, as well as grow their self-confidence and their well-being in areas of wellness and burnout and stress that our profession can really bring into your life.
Hmm.
So
Wow,
that's
that
the
was an amazing summary of several decades of your life and your impact today. So beautifully stated. Um, One of the things that I just my observation that I think that you did so wonderfully. I see a lot when people sell their business, especially a business that's so connected. You know, you grew up in that business, you grew up, in your childhood, but then also as a grown up, you grew up in there as well. And I
yes.
think you were probably at pretty high risk when you sold that to wander aimlessly and maybe even fall into depression or really struggle in that next period because you entered a whole new phase of your identity that didn't have this business actively in it anymore. What I what I got to see you do through your book writing process is pour yourself into how can I take this story and this experience and have an even greater impact on this industry than I had. I mean, you already had an amazing impact as CEO, but you were able to kind of lift your vision up even higher and go, now like the sky's the limit. I can really make a difference. And so through your book, through your organization, um, that's been amazing to watch because in the time that I've known you, all of those things have come to fruition. You're
Yeah,
a great leader too, and you are really good at organizing people to help you achieve the things that you want to achieve. I'd love for you to share a little bit more. We understand the meaning behind Funeral Women Lead, but maybe you can tell a little bit about what it is and what it, not only the mission behind it, your vision for the organization, and also practically what it provides for women in the industry.
sure. So Funeral Women Lead started off with some brainstorming with actually a colleague of yours, Stacy, that you connected me with through her branding company with Root and River. So Emily Sikorsky and I sat down in Phoenix, Arizona, at about a year and a half ago, and we just brainstormed what to do with this coaching company, how to make it more impactful. At the same time, I was in the middle of writing this book, getting to almost the final chapters that summer, and I said, you know what, I really feel like this book will make an impact. However, there needs to be something larger happen here. I'm one person. I can't possibly do this. But we got to the core of my purpose. And I think everyone needs to have a purpose statement in their life. And back when I was the owner of Baue as a CEO, I believed in challenging greatness, challenging our people to be great, as great leaders, grow them as leaders, as well as the service that we provided for families. And we kind of got into a different, you know how you wordsmith stuff and you just sit there and play with words. And instead of the word challenge, we came up with the word unleash. Because really what we're trying to do, as I was trying to do, as Funeral Women Lead is trying to do now, is help unleash the greatness in people. Because the leader is really down inside of you. Using your head, your heart, your grit, it's in there. We just have to bring it out. So Funeral Women Lead's purpose had to align with my personal purpose. And part of that is to help others become a better version of themselves, which we use the word great. So unleashing your greatness for women in the funeral and death care profession is exactly what Funeral Women Lead is doing today. We've got a summit, a wellness summit, where we're working on ourselves in becoming better leaders, people, caregivers, and caring for ourselves. right? So we can't be great leaders to anyone else until we better care for ourselves. We also have a leadership academy we started because we know that leadership is not being taught in mortuary schools, it's not being taught in college. And really, how many of us knew how to be a leader back in the day? And we're still learning. We're still learning good leadership techniques, and we don't always get it right. So how can we learn from each other and teach leadership? So we have a whole academy now that kicks off each fall, kicking off this November in 2025 for our very first, and then it'll go online all year. And Stacey, I have to tell you, I admire you so much with what you have done with your coaching organization and the company, and you're using Kajabi, which is a great learning tool as well as it hosts your community. So we borrowed that idea and we're using Kajabi for our Women's Leadership Academy, where there'll be online learning, community gatherings, as well as our wellness summit. We'll have a wellness community going forward, thanks to you and learning more about all the tools and toys that you use to make your company great. So that's kind of how Funeral Women Lead started. And our role really, our purpose is to unleash the greatness in women in our profession. And they need that because they are, even though they're the large majority coming into the profession, there's very few in leadership today. Our national association in the US is reporting less than 25% women who are members of their association. So we're struggling because these young people and young women growing up, they want to have families that possibly get married, possibly, grow their career. But do they have time to join associations? Do they have time to grow themselves as leaders? So we feel we need to help make it easier for them by having online services, people they can talk to, mentors, coaches, things like that will be available in our resource center to help them go further.
I love your focus on wellness. I think that is so important, so impactful. One of the things that I learned from your book that was really interesting that I had not thought about before is that, in the funeral and death care industry, you have to be on call.
Yeah,
Obviously, I mean, it's,
that's
it's
right.
like, duh,
Calls.
of course I should
We're
have
on
known that.
call at night. We answer the phones at night in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly, because death happens when it happens. And it made me think about midwifery or, OBGYN. There's certain professions where you are just on. And I don't know. I'm curious to know a little bit more. Maybe you can share with our listeners and viewers what that actually looks like on the ground for these up and coming leaders in this industry. I know another thing that you mentioned in the book is pay. And that can also be really challenging because not only are you faced with needing to be on call and available, but you work very long hours, and oftentimes the pay is not commensurate with the expertise and effort that is connected with the work. So maybe you can share a little bit because a lot of our viewers and listeners probably have absolutely no clue if they're not in the industry about what that's like.
right. So, well, being on call at night is not always easy. Depending on the size of firm that you work for, will depend on whether or not you're actually answering the phones and you're going out on call. Is how we define it. Where you'll leave your home, you'll dress up in a suit, and you'll go to the place of death, and you'll help transfer the decedent into the care of your company. And that can take several hours. So lack of sleep is a real big issue in our profession. Um, Finding that balance. There's companies out there now that will answer the phone for you in the middle of the night. They're great. So we moved to some answering services to help that. But it's still the funeral director on call that night still has to take the phone, still has to talk to the family. And then there's a transfer care team that will go out into the either home, nursing home, or hospital to bring the decedent back into their care. So it is a 24/7 business. There are licensing requirements and mortuary school requirements in almost every state in our country and you have to pass your state and national boards to be licensed many times to be either a funeral director or an embalmer. The pay inequity is a problem for both men and women. In this younger generation coming in, the hourly rate is what you can actually make at Starbucks or McDonald's. It really needs to be
Really?
risen. Yes.
Wow.
So you're coming out to do your apprenticeship after mortuary school. First of all, you have sometimes you have school loans you're paying off. And there are scholarships available for some, but not everybody. And the average mortuary school can cost upwards to $30,000. And it is either a 1 or a 2 year program, depending on the state and the state requirement. It's an associate's degree, and there are a couple of states that require 4 years of college, plus doing your apprenticeship and passing your national boards. So we have to make it as a profession, as an industry, we have to make it easier for these young people to become licensed. Now, online learning is new. Obviously, since the pandemic, it's really risen, and we have made that a little bit easier for people to access online learning. But as you know, online classes take time. At the same time, you still have to have a career and income coming in so that you can pay the bills based on where you're living. And when you get done, and there's school loans available, but as you know, many of those loans are at a high rate, high percentage rate. So these young people are coming out and earning somewhere in the low 30s when they're in low 30,000s in their internship. I've heard pricing is $26,000 to $28,000 as a pay scale when you're first licensed. Well, try finding an apartment,
Hmm.
feeding yourself, and not getting paid extra necessarily always for going out on calls at night. So it is a tough beginning.
Hmm.
And when I say make it easier for these young people, I don't mean that they don't need to learn, and they don't need to study the licensing, and they don't need to learn how to cremate. They don't need to learn how to embalm. They need to learn all of those things. And they need to learn how to be a good funeral director as well as a leader. But we also have to pay them to the point where they can afford to live, or they won't even make it past mortuary school longer than a couple of years. We haven't done any research recently in the profession, but we need to do some more research since 2019 to look at the attrition rate in our profession. We do know that the large majority of those that we're not keeping in the profession are women, of the attrition rate that we're experiencing. So the number one biggest challenge for funeral homes today in the United States is finding good staff. And the number one biggest challenge for those young graduates is finding a great culture and a great pay scale that they can afford to live on till they can get their license. And then
Hmm.
once they get their license, we need to bump them, and we need to give them a salary that they can live on with some progress for growing themselves as a professional. So our profession needs a lot of work. We're a
Yeah.
little
Well,
backwards in some respects. So
and it strikes me that, you know, a lot of the challenges that people in your industry face are very similar to challenges that people face in lots of industries. But you have, I think, another layer in the type of work that you do. I mean, it's such delicate and serious
it is.
work coming. I was just imagining, you know, I think about like my son woke me up in the middle of the night the other night, and I was so groggy and like, disoriented. And I just was imagining waking up and having to greet a grieving family in that state. It's just a whole different type of work.
It is. And when you first receive the call from a family, and especially if the death is in the home, which the large majority, because of the increase in hospice and now death doulas, we have death doulas in our profession that are there with people and helping them as they pass.
Yeah.
Uh, right? Death just doesn't always choose daytime, right? So you do have to wake yourself up rather quickly, get a quick glass of water, and be available to call that family or take that call that it comes. When we were young, I mean, the phone, you could see the blinking light on the phone in our house, and you would hit that button, you were automatically connected to whoever was there. So that phone laid by my dad's bed. I remember it as a child, and it had buttons on it, and those buttons were the funeral home lights. So my dad would take those calls all the years I was growing up. So I would watch that. And as I got older, sometimes we kids would be like, okay, we need to learn to answer the funeral home phones at home.
Really? Oh my.
Yeah. So obviously being the oldest, I got elected at times, and it was kind of odd. It's like, what do you say to someone when their loved one has just died? Right? You need to offer sympathy and empathy, and tell them you're sorry and let them know that you're here for them and you're going to take care of everything. And your job is to reassure them. So in many, many ways, we are very much like the medical profession, the nursing care profession,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stress that goes along with that. There are many times where um, we don't take good care of ourselves because we're so busy taking care of others. And it is a 24/7 business. However, I'm going to put a however in there because, you know, we can change a little bit. We can set boundaries on the number of appointments we take and the times that we meet families because you've got to give your staff some rest. And if any owners are listening here to this podcast, I'm encouraging them to put their staff number one, figure schedules out so they can balance the schedule. And yes, you might have to hire a few more people and spend a little bit more money so you have enough staff so everybody gets breaks, time off, and at least every other weekend off, and doesn't have to work every night on call. And I've lived through those days where every other night I was on call. Every other night I was working. My dad wouldn't close the funeral home till 10 o'clock at night for visitations. Yeah.
Wow.
So by the time you got the rooms moved over, the flower cards cut, printed more prayer cards by hand back then, you got home at midnight. And if you had the phones that night and you were on call that night, you were up still through the night and then getting up in the next morning and throwing your funeral suit on, doing your hair and makeup, by the way, which we girls have to do, getting your children fed and get out the door and be at church by 8 because you had to move the decedent into church for a 10 o'clock funeral. So imagine the shortness of the time period that you actually get to sleep. There's not a lot of it. And it's affected us physically over the years. Those that are in my generation, you can tell that there's a lot of health challenges going on. And we don't want to see that for the next generation coming up. And that's one of the reasons we started Funeral Women Lead, is to help teach and train these young women, first of all, to advocate for themselves, to speak up confidently about what their needs are, and to help them develop cultures and businesses that are cultures of caring and empowering and really focusing on the staff and their needs. Because without that, I don't think funeral service will succeed in the future. And I think women are going to bring their hearts to the business, not just in caring for families, but in caring for the staff and caring for the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm. At your wellness summit, what are the things that you're focusing on with these women that will be attending?
That's a really good question. Well, we're trying to make this well-rounded, Stacy, so that we are looking at well-being from a professional standpoint, a personal standpoint, and a leadership standpoint. We'll be having a 4-hour retreat and with a terrific lady. Her name is Kate Collins. She wrote a book called The Powerhouse in You, and it's about lifting ourselves up as leaders and realizing what our own innate powers are to be successful and to take charge of our lives in areas of wellness and well-being. We have an integrative healthcare physician coming that integrates both traditional and holistic methods, and she's going to be talking.
Oh, love.
I
That's
know.
awesome.
About women's health and what we need to do better in taking care of our bodies physically. You know, it's not just about medication. It's really about that balance and what we eat, what we do with our bodies, and obviously everything we put in it and all the environment we live in. And then we have a leadership trainer at the very end that's going to help us, who's certified in meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. So we're going to have a few little exercises to help ourselves during those stressful times, as well as set some goals to take forward as we plan our wellness for 2026. And there'll be some goal setting that goes on as well. So we're working on the whole woman from the inside out. And that's what we hope
Love
to achieve.
that. That's so important. I love that you're doing, the mind and the body. I think that's so
And the
incredibly
spirit.
important.
And the spirit too, because spiritual wellness is extremely important, regardless of our who we are or what our belief system is. A belief in something after this life and how we feel spiritually about the life we're in now, and perhaps the life we're going to someday, because death is a reality. Death will continue to affect all of us, right? What do we believe in after death? Is that important? And where are we going? And it's not religion, it's spirituality. And having that level of spiritual wellness and balance and having it very solidly, like, as part of our life where we spend time. How many of us really spend time doing that? Do you go out on a rock and just be? Do you go hiking by yourself? You and I have talked about taking a personal retreat, and you're pushing me to plan my personal retreat in January or February of 26, and I'm trying to fit it into a very busy schedule, but you're so right. That is part of the spiritual wellness time that we need to dedicate as women and men into our schedules, and probably do it at least once a quarter, is my guess. Revisit it. Take at least 1 or 2 focus days where we just work and be and re-energize ourselves.
It's so important. I think it's everything actually. When you look at like the scope of your year, actually a lot of the what you're able to accomplish and how you're able to live into your values and all of that comes from really anchored reflection. Not only that, think week or personal retreat or whatever, but those moments that you dedicate to reflection and looking ahead. I think it's so incredibly important. It's also why I love to run, because that's my kind of meditation, spiritual time, because it's like you've got the movement of your body and you've got nature. And I think it's such an amazing time to just think and process. And
It really is. It really is. One of the questions you and I talked about as we prepared for this podcast is what my favorite, something about what one book I would recommend to readers, or what's my favorite book that's really impacted my life. I had to think about that because I'm an avid reader, like I know you are. But the one book that I think really caused me, as I went through my ending years as a CEO of the company and headed into the pandemic, was Arianna Huffington's book called Thrive.
hmm,
And right, so she also wrote a great book called Sleep. But she literally pushed herself so hard that she collapsed one day and couldn't get off the floor. And she talks about it. Her children are all around her, and she couldn't even talk to people, and she like froze. And she was like, it was a big wake. She calls it a big wake up call for her. So as I realized towards the end of my career as the owner of Baue's, my wake up call was like, I had taken this business as far as I could. I had worked for almost 40 years to grow it with my team. I did not do it by myself, but it takes a lot out of you. And the death care profession can take a lot out of you. And what do I want to do next was my big question mark. I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know what it was quite yet. I knew it was going to have something to do with coaching, mentoring, and helping others, because that's who I am. And Arianna talks about the third metric of redefining our success that doesn't include power, that doesn't include money. It includes well-being, wisdom, wonder, and giving. And those are her 4 pillars. So think about what the first one is, well-being. And wisdom is using your head. Having a sense of wonder is seeing the world differently and seeing what's out there in the world, right? And giving back to the world, I think, is very important. So that's why I chose that book. I think is my number one most impactful book, because it brings those 4 things together in your life that are truly the keys to well-being. And I think the world's struggling with well-being. If you look at Gallup's recent polls, Stacey, in 25, they're saying that only 31% of the entire world workforce is feeling like they have well-being at work. Only 31%,
wow,
right? And out of
troubling.
all of those in the workforce, not out of the 31%, but out of all the workforce, only 21% feel that their employer or their supervisor truly cares for them, that they have a great relationship with them. So what's happened since the pandemic and what's happening now? We're not caring and giving love back to people like we should in business. And we're not taking that well-being and taking good care of ourselves, much less supporting and caring for our staff. And that's kind of my soapbox where I go when I coach others who are running companies in our profession and who are in companies. That goes to culture. That also goes to the survival and the thriving of the future of our profession if we don't get this right. We have to take, number one, our staff has to be the number one most important thing, over and above customers, over above profits, over above marketing, over above growing market share. If our staff is not number one, we might as well close our doors and stick a sign out in the front yard, like my good friend Dr. Alan Wolfelt says, slowly but surely going out of business, because we're not taking care of people's hearts. And these funeral directors, they give their hearts every day to families that are hurting and grieving and mourning the loss of someone very close to them. And their hearts are being hurt. And I'm kind of like, that's not okay, you know? We need to do something about that as a profession. And at Funeral Women Lead, we're going to do something about that for women, because they are the majority coming into our business. And we believe that they are the keys to the success of the future of funeral service. By taking care of their hearts and taking care of their head, learning to use their heads, and getting themselves a little gritty so they can stand up to all the hardships that are out there. Because it's not easy being in this business. It's not easy being in business at all, right? In today's world, depression is at an all-time high. How do we lift ourselves up? Well, it comes from inside. But we have to learn the tools and techniques to do that. So that's why we're having our wellness summit, and we're going to work on well-being.
Love it. I love it. I think it's so every industry should have an organization like this that is really focused on the whole person and helping not only develop as a leader, as a professional, but also as a human being. I think it's wonderful. Lisa, I'd love to loop back around to talk about your book.
Yes.
You are a newly published and best-selling author of the book Wake Up Calls. It's such a beautiful book. Anybody that's watching on YouTube can see this gorgeous cover. You can like turn it a little so you can kind of see the shimmer on the
Shimmer, right. And this is me sitting under our big oak tree at our cemetery. So you can see the little gravestones right here, little graveyard right here, and you can see the sun rising. That's where I used to go and sit by the lake, where we have some swans and little geese and birds and so forth, and just to sit on a bench and have a little time off and contemplate life, right, when times get hard. So that lake has become a very special place for families that have loved ones interred at our cemetery. And so that's why I chose that part of the cover. And
I love it.
Also, I'm married to a Bronco fan, and my husband loves orange and blue. So it just kind of came out in the colors.
You know, my alma mater is the Boise State Broncos, and we're also orange and blue. So, you know, it works. So multiple Broncos. I want to talk about your writing process, because you shared at the top of our conversation that you went through 2 of my programs. So just for any listeners that have, or viewers that are new or not familiar with my work, my 6-month program that I run now started as it kind of changed. It was like 8 weeks, and then 10, and then 12. And then the last group that I ran, I just realized that I needed a longer period of time with people. So now I run a 6-month program. So Lisa, you joined one of my shorter programs, and then I did the 6-month program. So you joined that.
Right.
So just for like a catch up for people so they know what we're talking about. The thing I'd love to know that I think will be very useful for our listeners and viewers is your process. If there was anything that you overcame, a challenge, a roadblock, I know there were, because we all face those as authors. There's always things, but maybe if you could share a moment or a few moments that came up for you and how you overcame them. I think that's the really important piece that I'd love for you to share as well.
Gosh. Well, I'm not the most organized person. And being a CEO, I'm an idea person, I'm a visionary. But to sit down and have the discipline to write and do the writing that it takes to bring a book to life, it was hard. It's not easy. But the 6-month class was amazing. And literally, you helped us start with our ideas, and you gave us assignments, Stacy. And what was helpful for me was to have a timeline in which I had to have things done. So it is like going back to school, and it was perfect because that's what I needed. I needed to be able to have that timeline, that discipline, that deadline, pardon the pun, come in and say, Lisa, this is due then, right? So it forces you to get organized. I also learned some new organizational tools that you shared with us, and how to find the time for writing, and how to be more disciplined in those times. and how to shut your door and tell the rest of your family and turn your phone off. Hey, this is my writing time, and it needs to be consistent. You have to consistently keep writing every single day. That was a little scary. It's like some days you sit back and you're like, what am I going to write today? I have no idea. And you may have all your notes in front of you, and then you go blank, and like you get stuck. And Stacy, through that whole book class, we would have moments of getting stuck, right? All of us did. And you helped us get unstuck. You said, it's okay to be stuck. Be stuck. Just take a couple days and be stuck. Take a week if you need a week and be stuck. You'll come back to it. But learning the discipline and getting myself organized, you provided the organizational tools through your platform that literally held our hands all the way through the process. And then when we got the really, really rough draft ready, and we're all sitting here going, oh, who's going to buy this book? Right? You gave us help with editing, and you found us editors, and you found us people that would listen to more of our stories that maybe we should have included. The other thing you did with us, I think, that the book experience for me, it was fun, but it was hard, is you had us dig deeper and deeper into our stories, because most of us were writing on the memoir side, or we were writing on teaching leadership or teaching something side, right? We had our stories, plus we had what we wanted people to hear and learn from them. And boy, that got pretty raw. And there were times we were sitting there crying, trying to share our story and read a little bit from our book. My poor husband, he's like, I can't read your first chapter again. It just makes me cry. So we're listening to it because I'm working on the Audible side right now. I'm a little late on my Audible, but we've been busy at Funeral Women Lead. And he's listening to the first chapter as we're traveling, and he's crying again. The first chapter. So, the challenge is, it's okay to cry. It's okay to show your emotions. It's okay to be vulnerable. You taught us that vulnerability was almost essential in the book writing process. It is essential. And to go deeper inside of you and how you feel about everything that you are trying to share, or your stories that you're sharing, and to be real with them, and to not really cover them up, just get them out there. Now, a few things fall to the floor in the editing process, which are good. But that was the biggest challenge for me, is the emotional side, is to let that out, because I was raised by very tough, thick-skinned Germans, and we're not going to show emotion, right? And there's no crying in funeral service when you're a funeral director, right? But that's not true. And to be able to show that emotional side, that was hard. But you helped us do it. You helped me do it too, personally. You and Robin, one of your editors, were just amazing in getting me to the end of the book. Did I answer your question? Okay.
You did beautifully. I think one of the other things that I love about the group space is it's like this little safe space where you can start to talk about your work, and you can be in community with other people before you go out into the big wide world. Because I can speak from experience as an author myself that, you are in isolation for so long, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I have to do an interview. I've never talked to anybody about this. So it's nice, I think, to get that chance to talk about your work, share your work. That piece of it, I think, is really nice. One thing I just wanted to highlight about you that I'm sure was true in your time as CEO as well, and certainly is true with Funeral Women Lead, but with your book, you really stuck with it, and you were very fiercely committed to getting this done. And it wasn't because everything was smooth. You did have some bumps during the process. You're definitely one of the busiest people I know. You travel all the time. Whenever I get on a call with you, I'm like, where's she going to be today? You're very busy, but you were extremely steadfast. And I don't remember who on the team I was talking to. It was kind of early in your process. And I think because you'd gone through the first program and you rejoined the second one. And I remember saying to somebody, Lisa is serious. She's getting this book done. And I just could tell. and you just stayed the course. And that's why you're a published author now. You stuck with it.
Well, and you all help too. I mean, it is like a big support group when you're with everybody who's writing the book,
Yeah.
because we share how it's going with us, and we share our fears, and we became friends. You know, a lot of us still see each other on some of your, chats and things that we do, our coffee and connections in the author influence circle. But Kevin O'Connor, who grew up above a funeral home, and I have become really good buddies. And
Love
I mean,
it.
he's so great. He came to my funeral home. He was in my hometown, doing a book signing, and I took him all around. And he came to convention just last week, and he helped us work our booth. And here's Kevin. He's wearing a Funeral Women Lead T-shirt. He's got my book in one hand. He goes, "Can I have my book too?" I said, "Of course." And he's got his book. He's handing out. We ran out of all the things he was handing out. He kept coming back to the booth for more. The man is fearless, and I learned
Yeah.
fearless from Kevin. I'm telling you, he is a marketer. And he walked around this entire convention floor with 3,000 people, and he's telling everybody about my book and about Funeral Women Lead. And when you make friends like that, in your book coaching class, I believe they're friends for life, right? And Joel, he's just amazing watching him, what he's doing with his book, Dear White Leader. I mean, it's amazing to follow these people and see all these wonderful things that they're doing, and it gives you hope that you can do it too, right? And they encourage you. So you encourage us, and we kind of help encourage ourselves. And I remember one of our conversations not too long ago where one of your writers said right before her book launch, "I'm just depressed. It's like I'm coming up to my book launch and I'm sad." And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Because as I launched my book in September, right, you get everything done and it's at the editors and or the book publishers, it's being printed. Now what do you do? What do you do
Hmm.
now? Okay, now I wanted that book launch party over with because I had to figure out what to do next. And I was like, what do I do now? The book's done. And somebody
You
goes,
lead
write a
your
second.
organization,
I
Lisa.
said, yeah, we're spending
You've
time.
got Funeral Women Lead to keep you busy.
Yeah, we've been very busy. But the idea for another book is starting to evolve, which is
Love to
fun.
hear it.
And you encourage us to do that. We've got a lot going on at Funeral Women Lead, but we've hired some more staff, so we've got tons of great help. They're very talented people, and it's going to free me up, I hope, in 26 to spend more time, maybe on developing the second book, as well as maybe coming to a little retreat that I think Stacey might be in the fall next year. I can practice my Portuguese.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll click right back in. I know that's how it is with Spanish with me. It just like comes back so fast. But if you ever test me, you won't believe I ever spoke Spanish. Especially now it's like Portuñol, Espanol, Portuguese, Portuñol.
And I would
Lisa,
say,
oh,
I'm really going to say this though. I want people to hear this. Everybody feels like, oh, I could never write a book, but I want to write a book, right? There's a lot of people out there that I know have shared that with me. I said, you can write a book. And I probably ran into no less than a dozen young women and women of all generations and men. I said, you should tell your story. Tell your story because the next generation will benefit from it. And we have to do this. It's not an ego thing. That, oh, I'm an author and all that. That's kind of hard for me to brag on myself. I'm not good at that. But if my story can help others, and your book coaching company helps us help others, then at the end of the day, we've done what we're supposed to do, right? And I thank you for that, Stacey.
hmm. Thanks, Lisa. I mean, that's why I love what I do because like we've talked about many times, it's the book, but the book is really about the mission. It's furthering that mission and that's what you're doing with your book and with your organization. I know that our listeners are so inspired by you. Can you tell them where they can find more about you, especially people in the funeral and death care industry, where they could learn more about Funeral Women Lead, or maybe share it with a friend that they know who works in the industry?
Absolutely. We can find us all over social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, funeralwomenlead.org. And you can reach me there at lisa@funeralwomenlead.org. So please reach out if you're listening from our profession, if we can help support you in any way. And this next year, we'll have more programs, we'll have scholarships available. So please stay in touch and join us as a charter supporter. It's free, and you'll get all our newsletters and all the information on our upcoming programs. As an author, you can reach me at lisa@lisabaue.com, and go to lisabaue.com to learn more about my book, a little bit about me as an author, and my journey through leadership since 1979 and earlier.
I'll be sure to link to everything in the show notes. We'll include a link to your book, to Funeral Women Lead, and Lisa Baue. Baue is Baue. Lots of vowels in your last name. Thank you, Lisa, so much for joining me. It's been a wonderful conversation as always.
You're welcome, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to you, our listener, our viewers, for being with us. I hope this was inspiring. I know it was useful. And I am hopeful that you will go out today and integrate a little bit of what you've learned from Lisa in this episode. And since you're still watching or listening, I know you must have loved this episode. So if you could take a moment to rate and review the show or subscribe if you're on YouTube, that would not only make sure that you don't miss future episodes like this one, but also support me in reaching more people with the message of living a life that's not just better, but beyond better. And as always, I have to thank Rita Dominguez for her production of this podcast. As I tell you every week, she is the reason it happens. You would not be listening at all without her, and she's the magic behind everything. And I will be back with you before you know it.